Hello, and welcome to another episode of AP Taylor Swift, the podcast for Swifties who like to dive a layer deeper into the music. So lean in close, turn up your volume, because class is in session. We're your hosts. I'm Monsi.
I'm Jen.
And I'm Jody.
And we are your unofficial professors of Taylor Swift.
Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of AP Taylor Swift. We say that every week, but this time it is truly a very, very special episode. This week we are going to be doing romance novels, which, what does that mean? You will find out very soon. But to help us with this topic, we have a guest. We have Lauren Rowe joining us. Lauren is a book content creator and director of PR at Handbright Marketing. She is your Bookish Bestie on Instagram, helping you find your next read. And you can find her on Instagram with the handle Rowe, which is ROWE.reads. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So the overlap between book lovers and Swifties is clearly significant, especially in the romance novel world. You spend a lot of time in that space talking to the people who are in the center of that Venn diagram. Why do you think that overlap is so significant?
I think the overlap comes down to just great storytelling. So whether it's through books or music, we're all just looking for those stories that make us feel something deeply, right? So Taylor Swift, she is, I think, a master of that. She pulls you into emotions, experiences, and just much like well-written books do for all of us. So I think that that's kind of the basis of that connection, and both readers and Swifties love dissecting every lyric or sentence, finding deeper meanings, relating those moments to our own lives. Mm-hmm. And I think that her ability to create that vivid emotional narrative is what stands out and what we crave in a great book.
I have said this a couple of times now recently, but something I think that is really true about Taylor, and I also think is true about romance novels, is even if the scenario in the story in the song is fake, the emotions are true in every single Taylor song. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so true in romance novels, and particularly, again, both of them are also for women for the most part. And there is something, you wouldn't think this, but I truly believe there's something radical about having happy endings for women, of having happy moments for women. And that tends to be belittled as a lesser art because for some reason, women suffering to be the plot device for moving the male character forward is high art, I say in major quotes.
Right.
But I've just been seeing this more and more doing this podcast, being in conversations with folks of like Taylor showing all the full range of emotions with women, which is sometimes wanting happiness or being happy, and sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's angry, really resonates. And I think that's true with romance novels too. You get a full spectrum often of the female's characters' emotions in those stories.
And Lauren, I'm curious, was there an aha moment that you had when you realized this connection between romance novels and Taylor Swift songs?
Yeah, I think that I've always been a reader. I've always, loved music just as much. And I was lucky enough to be born in 1989.
Wow.
So I have literally been on this journey with Taylor Swift since the beginning. I've been through every era in real time. So I think the aha moment is just realizing as an adult in my 30s now that a lot of that connection comes down to, again, finding yourself in these characters, in these plots. And as like Jen, you were just saying, we have our own lives as women, right? We've crafted it up until this very point. But there's always that, like, what if my life could have been this way? Or, what if it could have gone another way? And I think that living and putting yourself in a role of a female main character, whether it's in a thriller, a romance book, billionaire romance, angsty romance, why choose? There's something like fascinating about that. And I think that I've definitely heard a lot of that. It's like you find these connections with these characters and we are right there in those books with them going on this journey. And I think that that's what makes a great book. And I think Taylor Swift kind of does the same thing through her lyrics. So no matter what era you're in, you're putting yourself back in that space and you're going through each of those lyrics with her and you're finding that correlation between them. So I think that's the beauty of it.
There was a really compelling interview, this reminds me of, with Lin-Manuel Miranda,
Oh, I love him.
who talked about one of his favorite things as an artist is he doesn't want to cheat on his wife. He doesn't want to start a revolution necessarily. Specifically, we're looking at the story of Hamilton, if you don't know this.
Yes. Oh my gosh, my favorite.
Of course he doesn't want to cheat on his wife, and he certainly wouldn't say it in an interview, but yes, I see where you're going.
But his point is that the joy of being an artist is we as humans are limited to living one life, and we get to pick which one we want to live and do our best. But there's always that question as humans of what about all of these untaken paths? And as an artist, you can explore those paths in a safe way. And as people who are engaging with the art, I think it's a similar thing that we're engaging with those what ifs in a safe way where we're not actually like I think his point was he was like, I don't want to ruin my actual life, but I want the artistic exploration of all of those other paths. And we kind of get that.
Yeah, I was going to ask this a little bit later, but you already kind of started to touch on this. So I'm curious, when you're reviewing books, what are the specific things that you look for that make you go, okay, yes, this is a good book? I think you started getting into this in the last question. And just, is it the same for Taylor's songs in your opinion, or are there some differences?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely similarity. So when I review books, I'm totally looking for something that from the start feels like I'm going to feel something, right? If I can now tell, because again, I go through books. I go through about 12 books a month now. So I can quickly tell if a book is going to move me, if it's going to be a great book, in my opinion. If it's not, then I will DNF it. So I think it's just kind of one of those things. So with Taylor Swift songs in particular, I think with her, it's interesting because for the Tortured Poets department, her latest album, right? I didn't initially feel a connection with the majority of those songs.
Yeah.
I had to listen to it over and over again. And then, there's certain feelings, certain emotions that happened with me in particular throughout that month that I went back and then I found myself absolutely obsessing over certain songs within that album. And now it's like one of my favorite albums that she's ever written because I think that there's like a moment for each song that us as fans connect with, and it's not all happening at once. So when I review books, I'm looking for something again that feels authentic. It's well developed characters and relationships. I can tell from the very first chapters if it's going to hook me. I think it's the same thing with Taylor Swift and her songs. Like you just feel it. You feel it in your bones and in your emotions if it's going to be something that you really love. And if it's not, do you come back to it and you read a little bit more? And for me, like I've had slow burns to where I didn't initially love it. And then I went back and then, absolutely, fell in love with the book. So it really just depends on where I think I'm at mentally, emotionally. Same thing with Taylor Swift songs. Like there's a song for each feeling, each emotion. And I think that that's the beauty of it.
And if our listeners, if you are not on Book Talk or Bookstagram or the book blogging world, first of all, what are you doing? You would all love it. If you like this podcast, you would love that. Gosh, but yes. DNF means did not finish.
Okay, but DNF is also comes from the marathon world. They use that. Yeah, so I learned this from a book, A Beautiful Work in Progress, Myrna Valerio, where she writes about her like being an ultra marathoner and marathons and DNF. So I only knew DNF from a book
that is so funny.
about running.
Yeah, I love that.
But yes, there are many books that I DNF. But I think that's like a really mature thing. I remember there are some people who feel like they have to force their way through a book.
I struggle with that.
But if you bring up I just stopped. There are so many books. I had a really hard time getting into books this beginning of this year. And it took me until like end of February to finish a book because I just couldn't get into it. But you bring up a really good point about like this parallel to Taylor's songs, because I think the three of us have talked about Tortured Poets Department, that on that first listen we were
Yeah.
like, it's just so much, you're just overwhelmed, and you're like,
Yeah.
I can't quite get into it. And it's similar for books. There are going to be books that you start that you can't quite get into. Remarkably Bright Creatures is one that I recently, like I started it, I think a year or two ago, or when it came out, couldn't get into it, just came back to it, and I
So
was like,
good.
holy
Yeah.
shit, this book is
That
incredible.
happens all the time.
It's so good, but like it happens all the time, but I love that parallel in particular to Taylor's songs, because it's not just about books, songs, movies.
Totally. And I think what's kind of a hot topic within the book community too is the fact that readers feel obligated to read what's popular, right? Like if it's popular on Book Talk, I have to read it because everybody loves it. Kind of similar with Taylor Swift songs. Everybody loves this song, so I should too, but it's not necessarily true. Again, it goes back to what is your feeling at the moment, and it's okay to come back to it because you're most likely going to feel that connection when it's the right time. And
The wand chooses the wizard.
For sure. And speaking of,
the book chooses the reader.
We made it like 10 minutes before a Harry Potter reference.
Hey,
in this
and
episode.
Jen, you were the one that brought up a musical reference bright and early in this
That's true.
conversation.
That's
So
true.
we've hit almost all of the things that we always do in all of our episodes. Enchanted still left, still waiting for that reference.
Oh, I have one. Don't you worry.
Great. I knew it was coming.
Tuned.
I didn't need to preempt it. But Lauren, so speaking of book talk and bookstore and what's popular, like you also work in PR. So this Row Reads is not your only gig. You work in PR, and we are all marketers on this podcast. So we talk a lot about what a genius Taylor is from a marketing perspective, and how each era is marketed and branded differently. I'm curious from a PR perspective, what do you think about how Taylor markets herself and her albums?
Great question. I think that she has done this since the very beginning and unintentionally. So you have marketers who just kind of get it naturally. And I think that it's been one that's been organic for her. And I think it's been organic because she's so authentic to herself. And that's her own marketing, is like she has found a way to connect with every single person through her lyrics. And I think that from a marketing standpoint, how she approaches each of the eras is very smart. So again, it goes back to a moment fitting into each puzzle of a person's life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about the music, it's about like the visuals, the fashion, the clues, the Easter eggs, the fan engagement, all of that. I think she's mastered that from the very beginning, and we've seen kind of her evolve through that by keeping her audience guessing, like what's next, what is Taylor gonna do, what does she mean by that lyric. We found like so many Easter eggs, I bet it's this. It's kind of the same with books. So especially when you're into a series, I think authors have mastered this really well. And in a way, I would like to say it started from kind of the idea of how Taylor Swift has mastered this kind of Easter egg mindset in her PR initiatives. So authors will seed in, they'll introduce teaser characters, or they'll throw a cliffhanger. And it's like, you always want your readers guessing what's next, what's coming. That way they can be excited for what's next, in the series. And it's kind of the same thing with Taylor Swift. I think that, she creates enough buzz naturally through those initiatives, is that, it makes fans go crazy. And she doesn't have to put all these marketing dollars behind her budget now, because she has built this fan base who knows what to look for and is trained for that. And so I think that she's done a beautiful job with it, and it's exciting to see. And she's genius. She has full control of her narrative. She has made that very clear, and she's evolving her brand as we dive into each era in her journey.
I actually do recall an interview that she did a while back where somebody asked her what she would be doing if she wasn't a world famous mega pop star, and I think she said she would be some sort of a marketer. So I think we all feel this special affinity just given our own careers, but totally agree with what you're saying about how she makes it look so effortless, and it has kind of done it all along.
Yeah. One of the things that I always, whenever I talk to authors, especially from a PR standpoint, I always let them know how important it is to retain your audience, your reader base. So it is more expensive to acquire a new reader than it is to keep your own readers. And that's true for any type of marketing. Um, so it's the same thing with Taylor Swift. I think that she's not out to get new listeners, she's not out to get new fans, but she has prioritized her fan base and shown that she's cared. And that naturally has led to people loving her and introducing her to new listeners. That's what's really special.
Well, we have a lot more to discuss, which don't you worry, listeners. Lauren is staying with us for the entirety of this episode. But we have one question we ask every guest, and it's the question we had our very first episode on. So in our very first episode, we all shared the songs that first made us a Swiftie. So not necessarily the first Taylor Swift song you heard, but the first Taylor Swift song where you're like, she is onto something. I am a fan. I am in this. And so that is our question for you. What was the first Taylor Swift song where you're like, oh, all right. Okay, I'm in. Let's do it.
Yeah, I think so. Again, I grew up with Taylor Swift, but being the hopeless romantic that I am, I really felt like Love Story just was it for me. It's the first time I heard a song and thought, like, this is something special because it was so romantic, nostalgic. I mean, you saw the music video and it was like, that was a story within itself, right? And it was just kind of a fairy tale, built this fairy tale happy ending narrative that every girl wants. And so that entire album for me was extremely special because that's when I kind of latched on to Taylor Swift and just fell in love with her creative mind and her lyrics. And again, as a romance reader, I look for that in my romance novels that I read, and finding that happy ever after with your Prince Charming at the end of the book is extremely special, and that's what we all want.
Every time a guest says this, I am now legally obliged to tell you that we have a really special episode where we deep dive Love Story.
Oh, God.
And Monzi and I came up with a backed with evidence theory that it's actually about a teenage pregnancy, and Jody hated that theory. So our listeners have heard me bring this up every time this song comes up, and I now just feel like I have to.
You can't unhear it.
Gee, I wonder if you kind of feel that way, obviously, with like Daddy, I Love Him, that song and Love Story.
Very similar. Those songs are so similar.
Yeah, I agree. I got the same kind of feeling.
We've talked about how it's almost like a grown-up version of Love Story. It's just like fast forward.
Yeah.
But Love Story, it's the Scarlet Letter reference in particular that tips off to like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
That and the fact that Daddy, I Love Him is a parallel is...
Yeah, I'm having his baby. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. But she says, no, I'm not.
Oh my gosh. And like, again, like one of my favorite tropes is forbidden romance. And so you give me that all day long. And I'm spent. Love it.
All right. Well, so for our show and tell, what we are doing is we each came with a song that we think not necessarily, it could be attached to a real life romance novel, but a song that we think from Taylor is just made for the world of romance novels, and sharing why we think that. So,
yeah, I'm going to kick us off and just talking about the forbidden kind of love. We could have actually done Love Story. I just want to call out honorable mention to Love Story because we didn't do it here. We've talked about it on a different episode, but I chose
honorable mention to like all of Taylor's songs. Let's be clear. There's a lot in here.
Well, yeah, but especially Love Story. I mean, we're talking about romance novels, so it feels like Love Story deserves a literal shout out.
We try to challenge ourselves to do songs that we haven't done before, so that's fair.
Which then means we don't do the ones that fans probably want us to do.
All right, Monty, go ahead.
I did Sparks Fly from Speak Now. We're going way back in time. We're going so far back in time that I did not write the date that actual Speak Now comes out. I wrote Taylor's version in 2023. Was it 2010?
2010, I think.
Okay, Speak Now. Yeah, Speak Now came out in 2010. I was a high schooler at that time. And Taylor's version came out in 2023. This is track 2, and it is written by Taylor Swift, the one and only solo on this one. Found a little bit of a pattern that I think she writes a lot of her love songs kind of by herself. Well, we'll see if that holds true. But this one, First of all, when we found this theme, I was like, heck yes, I'm doing Sparks Fly. It was just the first thing that popped into my head. And I think there was always something about the way that, I mean, first of all, the use of the word sparks and just this idea that there's electricity between somebody was just such a clear romantic kind of song whenever, whether it's a rom-com or in romance novels. I think there's always this element of like, do the people have chemistry? What's the unspoken thing that's there? Specific things that to me make it feel like a scene out of a romance novel. I think there's the moment in the second stanza where it says, and you stood there in front of me, just close enough to touch, close enough to hope you couldn't see what I was thinking of. I really visualized that moment where the two characters meet and there's like the awkward tension. It felt very high school to me. I'm thinking of rom-coms, but like Cinderella story comes to mind. There's always like this moment where like the two characters are right there. They're like breathing on each other and you could just like, it's palpable tension. And then the main chorus, drop everything now, meet me in the pouring rain, kiss me on the sidewalk, take away the pain, because I see sparks fly whenever you smile. I mean, famous kisses in the rain. I'm going to go on the Cinderella stories train and argue that the Austen Ames and Cinderella, I don't remember what her name is in that movie, but great scene, great moment.
Sam something.
Oh, Samantha. Yeah, you're right.
I'm so impressed you remembered Austen Ames, like his character's entire name.
You remembered a lot of things that I did not.
I actually,
Delicious.
it just came to me as I was listening to the song. I was like, this is an Austen Ames moment. Where did that name come from? I don't know. It lives in my head rent free. I don't know. The forbidden romance that you mentioned, Lauren, I'm thinking of, there's a line about the green eyes as the lights go down. Give me something that, oh wait, that's not the forbidden part. But there's a part right after that that says, my mind forgets to remind me you're a bad idea. And I think Austen Ames was also a bad idea.
There you go.
Yeah.
Heath Ledger in
absolutely
one of the movies.
Just wrong enough to make it feel right. Like
Yeah.
there's a couple things in here that give forbidden romance.
In book world, we have this thing called the F it moment. And that lyric or that stanza that you just called out reminds me of that totally, because it's just drop everything now.
Screw
like
it.
Let's just do it. Let's do the damn thing. And that happened when that moment happens, you guys.
Magic.
That is like, my heart just like beats. And I always like, there's always usually like a slow burn leading up to that very moment, especially in a forbidden romance, and it's always the most exciting. So that's a great song choice.
Yeah, this is definitely that moment, that F it moment. You're the kind of reckless that should send me running.
Yeah.
I mean, every lyric. Yeah. Even the fact that it's raining. Take away the pain hints at some drama. You know, like, that our main character has gone through some evil stepsisters or something. And this is the moment that we throw it to hell.
Yeah.
You're very effectively selling me on this being a Cinderella story song.
I didn't mean to. I swear I was going to have other.
That's what I think of too.
I was going to have other stories, but honestly, like, yeah, it's just kind of a Cinderella story. Shout out to Harry for Green Eyes, but
great choice.
Yeah, had to throw that in there too.
I love it. All right, I have the second song. I went with Holy Ground from Red. Originally came out in 2012, Taylor's version in 2021. This is track 11, written by Taylor Swift. And I'll be honest, the reason I came up with this one is because it is now fall. Red is a fall album. And so I've been listening to Red again and again. And I live in New York. And so Holy Ground is a New York love story. And when I think about romance novels, I kind of imagined this as like, this is the synopsis of the whole romance novel. And it literally starts with, I was reminiscing just the other day. So the song kind of summarizes, in my mind, the whole story from beginning to end of the relationship. She says, you've got the setting, that first glance feeling on New York time. So it tells us where this song starts. And I almost see, like, if this was a novel, the novel storyline would fill in the gaps between the lines in the songs, but the song itself is the bones of the novel. And in fact, the song also is a little self-referential if this was to be a romance novel, because it refers to itself as a story. She says, back when you fit in my poems like a perfect rhyme, and then when the love starts to fizzle out and the stories got dust on every page. So in my head, this reminded me a lot of The Notebook, because that's a story that's being told, but you're learning the whole story in the present tense, but you don't realize it, and you don't realize the distance between the story when it happened and the story when it's being told until the very end. So in my head, if this was a romance novel, it wouldn't necessarily end where the song ends, which is this like reflective, if I don't want to dance, if I'm not dancing with you, tonight I'm gonna dance. If like you were in this room, and then I kind of almost see like he actually shows up and comes back. There would be this reunion after many years of
The
this
second chance romance.
Yes, see, thank you. This is why you're here. The second chance romance. It's got the love at first sight trope, but then also, yes, this would be a second chance romance song, and particularly like a whirlwind romance experience, which I find really fun.
Oh my gosh, those are the best.
I also interpret it perhaps as like a first love romance then to second love, because you have lines like, and for the first time I had something to lose, that this was something about this was a first time of feeling this way. So perhaps a first love. It's not a book, but it makes me think a little bit of the movie Always Be My Maybe with Ali Wong that came out in 2019. And it was like her high school boyfriend, and they reconnected when they were older. Very cute rom-com. I really enjoyed it.
I like that. And I just love what I love about this song, again, like because it had so much setting, because it was grounded in New York, and you have lines like, we had this big wide city all to ourselves, we blocked the noise with the sound of I need you. Like I got the setting so clearly, and that's what also screamed like, oh, this would be a great romance novel. This would be really fun.
Definitely. I could see this being like a billionaire romance as well. Like just for the fact that it takes place in New York, and that full circle moment where, you know, you get your HEA. But I think you're totally right with the setting, that it just takes place in like the fall feels.
Yeah, the fall vibes. Yeah, I love it.
Now that you said billionaire, I'm like, Prince and Me. I'm like, maybe it should have been rom-coms instead.
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot about The Prince and Me. That was like, you just unlocked a corner of my brain. That's Julia Stiles, right?
Yeah.
Well, bringing it back to romance novels, I just read a couple of Ashley Poston's books, 7 Year Slip, Dead Romantics, novel Love Story. 7 Year Slip in particular, set in New York, and does have not quite a little second chance with a twist. But yeah, I love New York in the fall. I find it to be very romantic, and so it was very fitting for a romance novel.
So I've never been to New York, but again, this is a cool thing about Taylor Swift, is like you could picture all of these vivid moments just through her lyrics, and it takes you to that place in time
for sure
in this setting, and you can just visualize it. So I feel like I've been there because I've been on this journey with her.
And I know we're not deep diving this, but I do think this is a point to the idea of creating romance in a poetic way. So Taylor, in the first 2 lines, is, I was reminiscing just the other day, 3 lines, while having coffee all alone, and Lord, it took me away, back to a first glance feeling on New York time. So we immediately know we're in New York, like you said, we have the setting. But I was really just skimming through this in this conversation, stuck on the line, we had this big wide city all to ourselves, we blocked the noise with the sound of I need you. And the way that she just narratively placed us in New York City, so we immediately, when you hear New York City, you think big bustling city, and then she flips that on its head a couple of stanzas later to blocking the noise. They had the idea of having New York City to yourself is one of the most impossible things you can imagine. And so you get this sense that the love, the connection they had was so intense that it was able to do something as insane as making it feel like New York City was all theirs. And how wildly beautiful that is in a romantic sense, to have that such a big connection that it silences everything around you.
Yeah. I mean, immediately I kind of think of Colleen Hoover. Oh my gosh, sorry guys. It's the movie It Ends With Us. and that's a whole nother kind of conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
But it's like that time, like they're not in New York specifically, but they're in the city, and it's that coming of age as well, and finding your own in this chaotic city, but you can only focus on that one other person. And it's that lyric, that stanza is so beautiful because it kind of depicts what that's about.
Yeah, and I feel like the location in a romance novel often, not always, but often plays a big part, right? If it's a city romance versus like a countryside,
a small town,
right? Like that helps set the plot in motion and creates context for the relationship often.
Yeah, imagine the story of "But Daddy, I Love Him" in New York City. It just wouldn't
very
hit
different.
The
Would be like,
same.
so who cares? You're having his baby. You and everybody else. Go ahead.
Yeah. Your neighbors don't know who you are, nor do they care. So
Sarah's and Hannah's, like, forget
they
it.
don't care about you.
No,
do whatever
go
you
ahead.
want.
Have fun. For sure.
All right. Well, I chose the song Starlight, which is also from Red, which, repeating a couple of things, originally came out in 2012, came out again on Taylor's version in 2021. Track 15, also written just by Taylor Swift, which is fascinating. This song, I think you're totally right in that Holy Ground and Sparks Fly both kind of had a little bit of a narrative to them. Definitely Holy Ground for sure. I think Starlight is a bit more of a moment. I think of it as a scene. I'm very visual, so I know we're talking romance novels, but I think of rom-coms because I'm very much imagining what it's looking like.
Same.
And to me, setting the stage that the moment is, quote, the night we stuck into a yacht club party pretending to be a duchess and a prince. And then, of course, they were dancing like Starlight. So they're at this party in a yacht club that they snuck into, and they're dancing, and like that's the setting. And to me, the way I imagine Starlight is sort of a like caught feelings while it was casual situation, that it's like a friends with benefits, and they're like friends and they're having fun and they're doing other stuff, and it's this moment, it's this party that they snuck into together, that they start to realize there's something real here, and it's while they're dancing that that's the declaration of love. And that's when we get the we could get married, have 10 kids, and teach them how to dream like we dream impossible dreams. That moment, this is very much in my own personal life, so like everyone falls in love differently, but I can definitely think about moments with Chris where it was like, oh, we started dreaming about our life together, and that's when I started feeling like it was really real for us, that it wasn't here's my dream and here's your dream, but we are making these dreams together, and a lot of them are never gonna happen, but because we're dreaming them together, it's like, oh, like we're on the start to something. So to me, this is that climactic moment of casual, but they caught feelings, they confess those feelings and start realizing like, oh my gosh, we could get married, we could do all of these things together. This is the when Harry met Sally, the speech at the New Year's Eve party. It's 27 dresses when James Marsden character jumps on the boat for the final wedding. Like that's the scene I'm imagining for Starlight. If it was a romance novel, I think it would be kind of the end, and then we'd have the epilogue to see them at their wedding. You know, we could get married and have 10 kids, and the epilogue is their wedding and they are getting married, and you know, all of those great things. But that's how I imagine this song.
I love that in this song and in Sparks Fly, by referencing Starlight specifically, I think of that there's a quote about how we're all just made of stardust anyways, and she's almost capturing in a word that electricity or that something that brings souls together. And we talk about this, maybe this is my Enchanted reference for the day, is
yeah, this is the song that I do think we could connect to Enchanted.
Yeah,
for sure.
Taylor does this thing where she turns the ordinary into extraordinary, and Enchanted is one of the songs where she does that so well. But here, and even in Holy Ground, actually, in all three of these songs that we've discussed so far, you have this moment where she's capturing that feeling of love and equating it to something kind of beyond our understanding. Holy Ground is something sacred. Sparks Fly, you're capturing the unknown electricity between two people. And here we have Starlight, which is, I mean, light moves at the speed of light, but it's also stars are bajillions of years away. There's star dust. There's this element of magic in even that, and the idea that we're dancing like we're made of starlight, something that's uncatchable, is really cool.
Yeah, I also thought with the dreaming of impossible things and the idea of wishing on a falling star that there was a connection there in some of the imagery of some things are impossible, but when we are like starlight, we could maybe actually achieve those impossible things in the same way you can wish upon a star and maybe have something magical happen to you.
Oh, I love that.
I think Julia Quinn captures us too, like in her Bridgerton series. This transports me immediately to like the garden scene where everybody's dressed to the nines and, you know, they're having a marvelous time. And it's just that visualization that you get whenever you see this in a romance book too. And I think throughout the series, you have that in Bridgerton, and it's the possibilities of the unknown. Like we could get married, we can have 10 kids. It's just this song is so special, and it just puts you in another space and time where you could just see so many things happening at once.
It's the beginning of the happily ever after. You're getting a glimpse of the ever after, and you're like, this is where it starts. Yeah.
I'm obsessed with putting this song in a period piece like Bridgerton. I think that's so fun.
I wonder if this is actually part of the soundtrack. You know how they have like
they were doing the instrumentals or whatever.
We have to look that up and see.
I don't think it is, because I remember it was a big deal when Wildest Dreams was a part of it. I feel like
I feel like this is one of the lesser known Taylor Swift songs, and Bridgerton tends to use like
popular
blank space or
Yeah, I feel like in period romance, I'm thinking of Pride and Prejudice, where sometimes you have the confession of love is private. It's somewhere, often in a garden, which is fascinating on its own, but you have that as away from society, and then you have these moments, and they similarly to the New York thing though, usually when this happens at a dance, the sound will kind of, and if it's visual or like a movie or a TV show, the sound of the crowd will kind of go away as they have this conversation together. And that's really interesting to me to think about that with the song of being at a party and dancing and all these dreams and stuff. But yet again, the idea of the romance is that none of them matter. They pretended to be a duchess and a prince to get onto this yacht party. So clearly important people were there, but we don't hear jack about anyone else. Like this could have been a party full of the most important people, most interesting people, but none of them mattered as much as they mattered to each other. And that's in a different way still separating them from everyone else, because there's something special, magical between the two of them that's more important than what else is happening.
All right, Lauren.
Yeah.
Last but not least, what song do you have for us today?
So I picked my favorite ever song by Taylor Swift, which is Dress. It is part of her Reputation album that came out, I believe, in 2017. This was written by Taylor Swift and Jack Antonoff. We started seeing her kind of embrace her sexuality, right? This song in particular has a lot of forbidden themes. Dress, to me, it's so intimate. It's an intimately charged song, and I can totally see it as the basis of a romance book, a forbidden romance book. It has that secret forbidden love trope with two characters have this intense connection but have to hide it. I'd envision it almost following a couple who are in different social circles, maybe even rivals in their professional lives, but they have these stolen moments where they give into their feelings, just like the song should suggest. And I think the tension for me would be incredible, because every interaction would, have layers of what they can't say or do in public, but behind closed doors, it's a totally different story. And so when I'm looking at the lyrics itself, I mean, I've even thought about tattooing this on my body, and I don't have any tattoos, but it's
but this would be it. This would be the one.
This would be it. It's just carve your name into my bedpost, but I don't want you like a best friend, where it's inescapable. I'm not even gonna try. That's one of the lyrics in there, and it's giving into the forbidden stance that I absolutely love.
This is perfect. Truly, this is that I think you've perfectly encapsulated that moment in a forbidden romance where you give in, where you're like, this is it. We're going to do this.
I love that you really focused on the forbidden part of the song. I think it's clear in the lyrics. It's about secret moments. There's definitely a side of this relationship that nobody else knows. But I think when I listened to this song, I was always more focused on just the dress part and the fact that that is meant for someone's eyes only. And I like the story around it and the idea that the whole romance itself is forbidden. It's there all along, but I don't know, somehow in my mind the song just didn't weigh that way. So I love the way that you described that.
Well, you asked Lauren if we'd done this song before. We did in our style episode, and so we focused on the dress specifically. So taking a very different perspective on this song, which again is something I really enjoy, because when we use these different themes to look at songs, you can take the same song and look at it in two completely different ways, or just see something different that you didn't see before. So in this instance, yeah, the forbidden romance element is so clear, yet that wasn't the lens we were looking at it through previously. So we see something very different now.
And I think the dress, that's like a whole nother, I could go into deep dives of this song all day long because, you know, the dress too, like I'm reading a book right now from Julianne, plug. And it's called Sunday Morning, and it is very much a forbidden romance.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, this song reminds me of a specific scene where, you know, she gives into she's dating a guy, and then she gives into the forbidden romance of her brother. And so it's just like shielding all of her good girl image because she's a pastor's daughter. And that could be like the dress part. So she brought the dress so you could take it off and just see the authenticness of me, and you love me for me. And that's kind of how I tied it in. And, you know, it's just so funny because I'm in the middle of that book right now, and I already found like such a connection through this song specifically, unknowingly, you know, that's happening. And I think you can find that with any kind of book that you're going into with her songs.
I like that each of our songs kind of like, it's also like a personal somewhat connection for like why it comes to your head. But I had the revelation that I met and started dating my husband in 2007, and that album came out in 2010, which is when we were like probably like peak relationship, like really excited, sparks flying, whatever. So I just like that we also like, in addition to just gravitating to books that make you feel a particular way, like I feel this theme of like you're also gravitating to songs that bring out similar emotions.
Yeah, the single girl in New York chose the song about dating in New York. So yes, that is
I mean,
I
didn't want to call you out, Jody. But.
No, I called myself out. That's fine.
Welcome
Totally
to
cool.
New York talks about like any great love, and New York City is a great love. And hey,
sure,
maybe New York City is your great love.
Maybe
so
I hope not.
Funny how that happened.
No, thank you.
There's so many possibilities in New York, though.
Yeah, I've got a whole crowd of people.
Take your pick.
Take my pick.
Honestly, I'm usually really good about separating songs from Taylor's personal life, but Dress to me always was so much about fame in so many ways. But you talking about it being enemies or something, or like rivals,
forbidden,
yeah,
like
forbidden love,
opened up so much to me of the romance fantasy genre. I'm thinking of Blood and Ash book from Blood and Ash book. So sorry, by Jennifer. I've never said this name out loud. Armentrout.
I think you said it right. I think that's how it goes. Yeah.
It's my favorite when Jen's like, "Oh shit, I never said this out loud."
I talk less. It's fine. But in those books, it's a similar thing where they realize they like are kind of attracted to each other, but then they're from completely rival situations. And then, you know, whatever, you learn more as you always do in those books. But yeah, that's really interesting to me to consider this a rival song, or like I love the workplace enemy.
Oh my gosh, me too.
Trope. I don't know why I love that so much. Like has nothing to do with me and Chris, but I think it just makes the concept of work more exciting to me, maybe, if that happened. But I'm imagining the beginning of it.
In a fiction land.
Yeah,
exactly.
Only in fiction. Do not date where you work. No, bad idea.
Well, so what I'm thinking of, You've Got Mail a little bit, being rival bookstore. So when you say our secret moments in your crowded room, I'm thinking of almost like an award ceremony, and it's you and your rival marketing agency there, and there's that handsome man who works for them who always beats you out for the clients, but you're really attracted to him. Like that kind of scene is what I'm imagining in some ways.
You guys, should we write a book based on
100%, yes.
Yes. I think that's what we just did here.
Let's do it.
The work
And
jargon.
Heads up, it's going to be a workplace billionaire romance set in New York City.
It's
Something
triggering.
about rival client. I was like, how to make this so unsexy. It's like, it's a rival competitor. Just, I don't know.
Yeah, and like even like made your mark on me, a golden tattoo. That actually is my favorite lyric out of this whole song. But yeah, they hooked up once, right?
Yes.
That was enough to leave that mark. Yeah.
After the office Christmas party.
After the office Christmas party.
And then they were like, oh shit.
Challenge.
Yeah.
Can we use all 4 of these songs in a romance novel?
I don't know if they could all be the same plotline, but I also love romance novels that are like a group of friends and you're following their different stories at the same time as they like interact. Yeah.
Very true.
Like Bridgerton, each Bridgerton gets a novel.
Yep.
We just created more work for ourselves, but this will be fun.
I love it. How are we going to do all that plus everything else that we already do?
We'll figure it out.
Well, we have a Substack.
We'll start it at Substack.
We'll write romance novels in weekly installments.
Yeah, our Substack evolves to 1 chapter a week of this this dress-themed romance novel.
Short stories. Here we go.
We'll go back to, what were they? I'm going to not remember what they were, but in the Victorian era, they used to have these broadsheets that they would print every week that had chapters of stories, which is why if you ever read Charles Dickens, the chapters are pretty short and have insane cliffhangers on every chapter.
Yes.
It's because it was to try to get you to buy next week. So we're just going to recreate that with Substack.
I love that.
aptaylorswift.substack.com/subscribe in case.
I will be subscribed all the way.
You're going to help write it. You better be
subscribed. Oh, yeah, that's right.
You have a whole novel to write.
We have a novel to write. 1 chapter a week.
I love it.
Well, Lauren, thank you again so much for joining us. This was an absolute blast. Can you remind listeners one more time, if they want to find you, follow you, interact with you, how can they find you?
Yes, like you said in the beginning, I will be your bookish bestie. I have such a safe space on my profile, so you can connect with me on TikTok or on Instagram. That's where I'm primarily at. I even have Facebook, and it's really easy. It's just at row.reads.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and catch us next week as we deep dive and analyze another Taylor Swift song.
That's all we have for you today on AP Taylor Swift. Be sure to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on your social channel of choice at AP Taylor Swift to stay up to date. And join us next time as we overanalyze and deep dive into the next Taylor Swift song on AP Taylor Swift.